I'll never forget the sound of that bus pulling away, the hiss of its brakes fading into the cold Ohio night of 1980. I was 22, standing there on the cracked pavement of the Canton bus station, staring at the taillights shrinking into the dark, realizing I had nothing. No money, no coat, no way home. And the only person I thought I could trust, my best friend, Ricky Barnes, had just left me there like I didn't matter. I need you to picture this. A half-lit bus station, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights, the smell of cigarettes and burnt coffee drifting from a vending machine that probably hadn't worked right in years. It was close to midnight and most of the people had already cleared out. All that was left were a few broken benches, the buzzing of those lights, and me. And let me tell you who I was back then. My name's David Harlow. 22 years old, a kid who thought he had the world figured out. My mom, Lillian, always said I was steady, the one she never had to worry about. My dad, Frank, well, he didn't say much, but when he did, it usually came out in a kind of growl, reminding me to work hard, be tougher than the world. And then there was my little sister, Claire, 16, with bright eyes and big dreams. She thought Ricky was the coolest guy in town, called him the brother I never had. Ricky and I had been friends since we were kids. He had this reckless charm that could get him out of any mess or into one. If I was the steady one, Ricky was the wild one. People liked him right away, and I was no exception. We'd spent years getting into trouble together, dreaming about escaping our small town. The truth is, I admired him, even when I knew better. That night, Ricky had talked me into coming with him on one of his little adventures. He made it sound exciting, said he knew people in Cleveland who could hook us up with something bigger than our dead-end jobs. He painted a picture of fast money, opportunity, a life outside the factory walls that caged our fathers. And I wanted to believe him. But standing there, watching the bus disappear and realizing Ricky wasn't beside me, I felt the truth slam into my chest like a brick. He was gone. Just gone. He'd taken the last of our cash, left my coat in his car, and vanished into the night. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing. I could still hear his voice from earlier that evening. "Relax, man, you worry too much. Life's about taking chances." I'd shot back, "Yeah, but not stupid ones, Ricky. What if we get stuck?" He'd just laughed, that easy laugh of his, like I was being uptight. And now, I was the one stuck? I remember looking down at my hands, rubbing them together against the cold, trying to stop the sting of the wind cutting through my shirt. I thought about my mother's words before I left. "David, don't trust Ricky to look out for you. You've always been the one keeping him out of trouble, not the other way. Around." She was right. God, she was so right. The cold bit harder the longer I stood there, and the fear started to creep in. It wasn't just being stranded, it was the humiliation, the shame of realizing I'd ignored every warning, the anger boiling at Ricky for abandoning me, and the growing panic of what came next. The station was closing up, the attendant locking the doors telling me, "Son, you can't stay here all night." I stepped outside into the street, and that's when it hit me. I was 12 miles from home. 12 miles of back roads, empty fields, and biting winter air between me and the only safe place I had. And I had nothing but the clothes on my back. But here's the thing. That night, that moment of betrayal, became the night that changed everything for me. It was the night I stopped being the kid who followed Ricky into trouble. It was the night I learned what it meant to survive on my own. And here's the part I want you to hold on to. Last week, 43 years later, I drove past that same bus station. Only this time, I wasn't stranded. I wasn't begging for warmth or safety. I was sitting in the back of a limousine, my driver waiting for the light to change. I looked out the tinted window, saw that broken-down place that nearly broke me, and I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I just kept driving. That's the story I want to tell you, the story of how one night of betrayal and 12 frozen miles put me on a path to build a life from scratch. When I think back to that winter of 1980, before the night at the bus station, the first images that come to mind aren't the betrayal or the walk home. It's the smell of steel and smoke drifting from the factory near our house, the sound of my father's boots on the porch after another long shift, and the way the snow piled high against our old mailbox like it was trying to swallow the whole street. I grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Canton, Ohio. Most of the families around us lived paycheck to paycheck, and every morning you could see men trudging off to the mills with lunch pails in their hands. My dad, Frank Harlow, was one of them. He was a man of few words, tough as the calluses on his hands, with a stare that could silence a room. He worked at the steel plant since he was 16, and by the time I was 22, his back was bent from decades of lifting more than any man should. At night, when he sat at the kitchen table, he'd pour a black coffee, never anything stronger, and tell me, "David, don't get stuck in this town. Don't end up with your back broken and your spirit gone." But here's the thing, he never told me how to escape. He just expected me to figure it out. That was my father. My mother, Lillian, was the opposite. Soft voice, steady hands, and the kind of warmth that could cut through the coldest day. She worked part-time at the library, and when she wasn't there, she was keeping the house running. She had a way of knowing things before they happened, a kind of intuition, and she never trusted Ricky. Every time he came by, leaning against his car with that cocky grin, she'd look at me and say, "David, you're the anchor. Don't let him drag you out into a storm." And then there was my little sister, Claire, 16 years old, full of light and dreams bigger than our town. She'd sit in the living room sketching dresses in her notebook, saying she was going to be a designer in New York City one day. Claire adored Ricky. She thought he was daring, exciting. She'd tease me, saying, "Why can't you be more like Ricky? He's not afraid to live a little." I'd just roll my eyes because I knew what she couldn't see. Ricky's fire burned bright, but it had no direction. It was all sparks, no flame. Ricky Barnes and I had been friends since grade school. We were opposites in every way, but somehow that kept us close. I was the cautious one, the planner. Ricky? He was reckless, charming, the kind of guy who could talk his way into or out of anything. He had messy blonde hair, a laugh that carried across a room, and a way of making you believe him even when you knew better. People liked Ricky instantly. Teachers, girls, and strangers at the gas station. It didn't matter. He had that pull. We used to talk about leaving Canton, making something of ourselves. He'd say, "Dave, we're not meant for this place. Look around. Everybody's just waiting to die, not us. We're gonna live." And I believed him, because part of me wanted it too. I didn't want to end up like my father, bent and bitter. I didn't want to spend my life staring at the same smokestacks. But where I wanted a plan, a job, a way to build something, Ricky wanted shortcuts. He was always chasing the next scheme. A card game in the city, a guy who promised work if we could just scrape up enough cash for the bus fare, a big opportunity that was always just one risk away. And I followed him more than I should have because he made it sound like adventure. I remember the night it all started, the night before the bus station. Ricky showed up at my house in his old Chevy, honking twice like always. My mom peeked through the curtain, sighed, and said, "David, don't go running off with him tonight. Nothing good comes from Ricky's kind of promises." My dad didn't say anything, just shook his head and went back to his paper. But Claire, she came bounding down the stairs with a grin. "Tell Ricky I said hi. Ask him when he's going to take me to see a concert in Cleveland." She was glowing, her eyes full of mischief, and I couldn't help but laugh. I slipped on my boots and grabbed my jacket, telling my mom, "It's just a quick trip. I'll be back before it gets too late." She gave me that look, the kind that cut straight through the bravado. You always clean up Ricky's messes. One day, he won't be there when you need him. I didn't realize it then, but she was foreshadowing everything. When I walked outside, Ricky leaned against his car, a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Dave, you ready for something big? I got us a shot at changing everything." I raised an eyebrow. You mean trouble? He grinned, tossing the cigarette onto the ground and stomping it out. Come on, man, trouble's just another word for opportunity. And with that, I got in the car. Looking back, that was the last night I left home as the old David, the trusting, cautious one who still thought Ricky might lead me somewhere better. The next night, at that bus station, I'd learned the hard way that the only person I could really count on was myself. The ride to the bus station felt like every other one of Ricky's wild schemes. His Chevy rattled along the back roads, the heater barely working, music from the radio humming low under the roar of the engine. Ricky tapped the steering wheel with that restless energy of his, like he was already 10 steps ahead in a game only he understood. So, here's the plan, he said, flashing me that grin. Guy I know in Cleveland's got a job lined up. Real money, none of this small-town junk. We just get there, shake a few hands, and we're set. I folded my arms, staring out the window at the blur of snow-covered fields. What kind of job? Ricky laughed. Don't worry about it, man. You always need every little detail. Sometimes you just gotta jump. I sighed. That was Ricky. He never gave straight answers. And yet, despite every warning in my head, I stayed in that passenger seat because a part of me still believed maybe this time he'd deliver. When we pulled into the bus station, the place looked even worse than I remembered. The paint was peeling. The windows fogged up from the damp cold. A neon sign above the ticket booth flickered, half the letters burned out. Inside, the smell of stale coffee and cigarette smoke clung to the air. We walked up to the ticket counter and Ricky leaned in with his usual charm. 2 for Cleveland tonight. The clerk, a tired-looking man with glasses sliding down his nose, muttered, $26. Ricky patted his pockets, pulled out a crumpled $10 bill, some change, and then looked at me. You got the rest, right? My stomach sank. What? You said you had it covered. He smirked, shrugging like it was no big deal. Relax, Dave, just spot me this once. I clenched my jaw. Ricky, I told you, we can't just spend every dime. What happens when we get stuck in Cleveland with nothing? He waved his hand dismissively. We won't. Trust me. But I didn't trust him, not anymore. Still, I dug into my wallet and handed over the bills. Because the alternative meant turning around, admitting my mom was right and facing my dad's silent disappointment. We sat down on one of the cracked plastic benches, waiting for the bus. Ricky was restless, tapping his foot, looking around like he was hunting for something or someone. A girl across the room caught his eye. Blonde hair, red scarf. Ricky lit up like he'd just struck gold. Give me a second, he said, standing. Ricky, don't start. But he was already walking over, leaning on the back of the vending machine, flashing that grin I knew too well. The girl laughed at something he said, and for a moment I thought, fine, let him have his fun. He'll be back before the bus boards. The minutes dragged on. The bus engine rumbled outside. People started lining up. I glanced toward the vending machines. Ricky wasn't there. I stood, scanning the station. He was gone, just gone. Panic started creeping in. I walked outside, the cold air hitting me like a slap. The lot was nearly empty. Ricky's Chevy wasn't there. My coat, my only real protection against the freezing night, was still in his back seat. And the bus driver was shouting, "Last call for Cleveland." I turned back toward the entrance, my pulse pounding. The girl was still there, alone now, sipping from a soda can. Ricky had vanished. It hit me all at once. He'd left me. He'd taken off, car and all, and left me with nothing but the clothes on my back. I rushed to the counter. "Sir, excuse me. Did you see my friend?" The clerk barely looked up. "If you mean the guy with the smart mouth, he left about 10 minutes ago. Got in a car and drove off." I felt my stomach twist into a knot. He had my coat, my wallet, everything. The clerk shrugged, uninterested. "Not my problem, kid. Bus is leaving." And just like that, the last bus to Cleveland pulled away, its headlights cutting through the night before disappearing down the road. I was alone. The station attendant started locking up, calling out, "Can't stay here, son, closing for the night." I stepped out into the street, the cold biting harder than ever. My breath fogged in the air, my hands numb already. I looked down the road, 12 miles of darkness between me and home. That's when the weight of it hit me. Ricky, my best friend, my so-called brother, had abandoned me without a second thought. The betrayal burned hotter than the freezing wind. All those years I'd stood by him, defended him, cleaned up after him, believed in him, and this was how he repaid me. I could hear my mother's voice in my head, sharp and certain. One day he won't be there when you need him. And she was right. And this 700-word expansion raises the tension steadily through dialogue and description. Shows Ricky's betrayal directly, not just implied. Captures David's emotional state, humiliation, anger, fear. Ends with David alone, stranded in the cold, perfectly setting up Section 4, the turning point. Do you want me to now expand Section 4, the turning point, the 12-mile walk, decision and struggle, into its own 700-word dramatic sequence? You said, yes, expand Section 4 and do it in 700 words. ChatGPT said, perfect. This is the section where David, stranded and humiliated, makes the decision that changes everything. The turning point isn't just the physical walk, but the mental vow that transforms him. We'll make it raw, cinematic, and emotionally immersive. Here's the 700-word expansion for Section 4, the turning point. Section 4, the turning point, 700 words. I stood there outside the bus station, the doors locked behind me, the street empty and silent except for the wind whipping against my ears. My breath came out in sharp clouds, each one vanishing into the dark. I pulled my shirt tighter around me, but it was useless. My coat, my only shield against the cold, was in Ricky's car, already miles away. At first, I just stood frozen, staring down the road, hoping maybe he'd come back. Maybe this was some kind of sick joke. Ricky had always pushed things too far, but surely he wouldn't leave me here like this, not completely stranded, not when he knew I had nothing. But as the minutes stretched on, that hope died. The only sound was the wind rattling a loose street sign and the distant hum of the highway. Ricky was gone, and he wasn't coming back. I looked down the empty stretch of road that led home. 12 miles. I knew the distance because I'd biked it before in the summer, but winter was different. The temperature was already dropping below freezing, and I had no gloves, no hat, nothing but thin shoes and the clothes on my back. My stomach twisted with fear. If I stayed put, I'd freeze. If I started walking, I might not make it. I closed my eyes and saw my mother's face. I heard her voice, gentle but firm. "David, you're the steady one. You're the one who doesn't give up." And then I thought of Claire, my kid sister, sitting at home waiting for me to come back like I always promised I would. She believed I could do anything. She believed in me more than I believed in myself. That was enough. I clenched my fists, shoved my hands into my pockets, and whispered into the night, "Then I'll walk." The first few steps felt easy. The adrenaline carried me, anger at Ricky heating my blood. Every crunch of my shoes on the frozen gravel echoed louder than it should have in the silence. Streetlights gave way to long stretches of darkness, fields on either side blanketed in snow. The wind cut through me, sharper with every mile. After the first hour, my body started screaming at me. My toes burned, then went numb. My hands ached from being curled inside my pockets. I thought about lying down just for a moment, letting the cold take me. But then I pictured Claire finding out her brother froze on the side of a country road because he gave up. That image pushed me forward. By mile 5, the anger began to fade, replaced by exhaustion. My legs were heavy, each step slower than the last. My mind drifted back to Ricky. How many times had I defended him to my parents? How many times had I believed his promises? I remembered the night he stood outside my house telling me, "Dave, one day we'll laugh about all this small-town garbage. You and me, brothers forever. Brothers forever." I spat into the snow, muttering, "Brothers don't leave each other to die." I pushed on. Around mile 8, the darkness seemed to press in tighter. The wind had picked up, and snowflakes stung my face. My breath came in ragged gasps. My body wanted to quit, but my mind wouldn't let it. I started talking to myself, whispering encouragement just to hear a voice. "One step at a time, David. Don't stop. Don't you dare stop." When the outline of the water tower near our neighborhood finally appeared in the distance, I felt something crack open inside me. Relief, anger, determination, all tangled together. My feet were blistered, my lips split and bleeding from the cold, but I wasn't dead. I was still moving. By the time I stumbled onto our street, dawn was just starting to break, a pale orange glow stretching across the horizon. My legs buckled under me as I climbed the steps to our porch, and I collapsed against the door, too weak to knock. A moment later, the door swung open, and my mother gasped. She pulled me inside, wrapping me in blankets, her hands trembling as she pressed them against my frozen skin. My father stood in the kitchen doorway, silent, his jaw tight. I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before, half anger, half pride. And Claire, she knelt beside me, tears streaming down her face. "David, I thought you weren't coming back." I forced a smile through cracked lips. "I told you I'd always come back." That night on the road broke me down to the rawest parts of who I was, but it also gave me something Ricky never had, resolve. As I lay there wrapped in blankets, shivering but alive, I made myself a promise. I would never let anyone else's choices decide my future again. I would build something of my own no matter how long it took or how hard it was. And that vow, that decision to walk, to survive when I could have quit, was the turning point of my life. 43 years later, I found myself back in Ohio on a business trip. My life couldn't have been more different than it was that freezing night in 1980. I had built something real. A business with my name on the door, a family who believed in me, a life that would have been unimaginable to the kid shivering outside that bus station. The limo I sat in hummed softly as it rolled down the highway, leather seats wrapping around me like a cocoon. Outside the tinted windows, snow fell in heavy flakes, the landscape coated in the same icy white I remembered from that night. But this time I wasn't on foot. I wasn't broke. I wasn't scared. My driver, a quiet man named Charles, glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "We'll be passing through Canton in about 20 minutes, Mr. Harlow. Want me to take the back way or stick to the highway?" I hesitated. A part of me wanted to avoid it altogether, to never see that station again. But another part, the part forged on that 12-mile walk, knew I had to. "Take the back way," I said, my voice steady. The closer we got, the more memories pressed in. My mother's warnings, my father's silence, Claire's tears when she thought I wouldn't make it back. And Ricky, always Ricky, laughing, promising me adventure, then vanishing into the night when it mattered most. We turned a corner, and suddenly, there it was, the Canton bus station. Time hadn't been kind to it. The paint had peeled down to bare concrete, the roof sagged in places, and the neon sign above the ticket booth was still flickering, just as broken as it had been decades ago. A few cars sat scattered in the lot, their headlights cutting through the snow, but otherwise it looked the same. Exactly the same. My chest tightened as I stared out the window. For a moment it was like I was 22 again, standing in the cold with nothing but rage and shame in my veins. I could almost hear the hiss of that bus pulling away, feel the weight of betrayal crushing me. Charles slowed the limo at a stoplight in front of the station. He glanced back. "Sir, do you want me to pull in?" I didn't answer right away. My hand rested on the door handle, the urge rising to get out, to walk across that cracked pavement, to confront the ghosts that had lived inside me all these years. Part of me wanted to scream at that building, to curse it for what happened, to prove to the world how far I'd come. But as I sat there, I realized something. That night wasn't just the worst night of my life. It was the beginning of everything. Without the betrayal, without the 12-mile walk, without the fire it lit inside me, I wouldn't be sitting in this limousine now. That pain had been my teacher. That station, as much as I hated it, was the place where I stopped being a boy who followed and became a man who led. I looked out the window one last time and whispered, "Thank you." The light turned green. Charles asked again, "Should I pull in?" I shook my head. "No, keep driving." And just like that, we rolled past. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because the truth was, I had already left that station behind a long time ago. I'd carried it with me for years, carried Ricky's betrayal, my anger, my shame. But now, passing it in the comfort of that limousine, I realized I didn't need to stop to prove anything. My life, the one I built from nothing, was proof enough. As we pulled away, I thought about Ricky. I hadn't seen him since that night. I never knew where he ended up, and maybe I never wanted to, because in a strange way, he had given me the greatest gift, the chance to stand on my own. He showed me who I could never afford to be. The limo glided back, onto the highway, the snow swirling in the headlights. I leaned back into the seat, a calm settling over me I hadn't felt in years. That boy who once shivered outside the station was gone. In his place was a man who had walked through the dark, kept going, and built a life that couldn't be taken away by anyone's betrayal. For the first time in decades, the weight of that night lifted from my shoulders, and I didn't stop. I didn't even slow down. I just kept driving. As the limo carried me away from that old bus station, I felt lighter than I had in years. It wasn't the leather seats or the success I'd carved out for myself. It wasn't even the fact that I was looking at the world from behind tinted windows instead of through the fog of my own breath on a freezing night. It was the realization that I no longer carried that night as a burden. For the first time since 1980, it was simply a memory, not a wound. I thought about Ricky. Truth is, I never saw him again. After that night, he disappeared from my life as completely as if the earth had swallowed him. Every now and then, I'd hear rumors. Someone said he got into trouble in Akron. Someone else swore they saw him working odd jobs down south. But I never went looking. I didn't need to. Ricky belonged to my past, and my past no longer owned me. When I was younger, I used to fantasize about seeing him again. I imagined him broke, washed up, maybe asking me for help. In those daydreams, I always pictured myself standing tall, telling him exactly what his betrayal had cost me. But now, older, wiser, I realized something else. Ricky didn't owe me anything anymore. He had already paid me back in the strangest way possible. His betrayal forced me to walk into the cold and find out what I was made of. And that lesson was worth more than any apology he could have ever offered. That night changed how I lived every day of my life. From then on, I stopped waiting for someone else to show me the way. I stopped leaning on charm and promises. I worked. I built. I stumbled, sure, but I never quit. The boy who nearly froze on the side of the road became a man who knew he could survive anything. And survival turned into strength, and strength turned into success. I built a company with my own 2 hands. I married a woman who saw me for who I was and stood by me in every storm. I raised children and told them the same thing my mother once told me. Don't let anyone else decide your future. But unlike my father, I didn't just warn them about what not to be. I showed them what was possible if you kept walking forward, one painful step at a time. My sister Claire still brings up that night sometimes. She laughs about how I used to roll my eyes at her crush on Ricky. She'll say, he was a fool, but in a way, he gave you everything. And she's right. She still sketches, still creates, and every time she finishes a design she loves, she tells me it was inspired by the brother who never quit walking. My mother is gone now, but I can still hear her voice. I can still see the way she pulled me inside, wrapped me in blankets, whispered, "You're safe now." She never knew how much those words meant, because deep down, that was the night I stopped being safe. But I think she'd be proud of the man I became because of it. My father, he never said much about it. But years later, when he watched me open the doors to my own business, he put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Guess you found your way out after all." That was all I needed to hear. So here's the truth I want you to take from my story. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is the very thing that sets you free. Sometimes betrayal is the spark that forces you to find your strength. That night, Ricky left me to freeze. But in reality, he left me with something far more valuable than money or a coat. He left me with myself. And maybe that's the lesson. We all get stranded at some kind of bus station in our lives. Maybe it's a failed relationship, a friend who walks out, a job that disappears, a dream that crumbles. You stand there, cold and afraid, wondering how you'll ever make it home. But if you keep walking, if you refuse to give up, you'll find a strength you didn't know you had. I never stopped being grateful for that long, bitter night. It taught me that resilience isn't born in comfort. It's born when you have nothing left but your will to move forward. So, when I passed that station in a limousine, I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure from Ricky. I already had everything I needed. I had the proof of who I became. And that's why I didn't stop. That's why I didn't even slow down. I just kept driving, because the man who walked 12 frozen miles in 1980 never looked back again. So that's my story, the night my best friend left me at a bus station in 1980, and the 12 frozen miles that forced me to build a life from nothing. Looking back, I don't carry bitterness anymore. What I carry is the lesson. You can survive more than you think. And sometimes the hardest night of your life is the one that gives you the strength to create something better. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been left behind, betrayed, or had to walk through your own dark night, know this: you are stronger than you realize. And if you keep moving forward, step after step, you'll come out the other side with something no one can take away. I want to thank you for watching and spending this time with me. Stories like this aren't just about the past, they're about connection. So if this video spoke to you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like the video if it moved you. Share it with someone who might need to hear this today. Leave a comment about your own turning point. I read every single one. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Until next time, remember this: no matter what bus station you've been left at in life, don't stop, don't look back. Keep walking, keep driving forward.